spent the last 2 days preparing for Abattoir of Zir as it comes out in the next 2 days. And what I'm going to do today is kind of explain the process I went through in preparing for it. So if you're doing the same thing, hopefully this will help or be like a sounding board for you to see what other people are doing. So let's get into it. We're also live right now, so you can come on by the live stream if you have any questions that are not answered within this video. You can find the link in the description as well as the pinned comment. Now, to start, my only character was the 100 Druid Hardcore, and because I don't have a lot of Scroll of Escapes, I want to be able to test the new Abattoir of Zir content before actually trying to defeat it with the Hardcore, so I made a Softcore Barbarian to start. So after making the Softcore Barbarian, obviously I needed to level him to level 100 and get him prepared for the Nightmare tier dungeons. Along the way, what we need to do is complete the season journey in order to actually unlock the new in-game content. And you can either do this by leveling all the glyphs, or for me, some of the easier ones was doing the Purifying the Seeds of Hatred on the Softcore character. You can literally make a brand new character, go do Seeds of Hatred in the PvP area and get this done if you're a hardcore player, and it will still count for your hardcore season journey. Or if you have a one-shot build, you could go destroy Uber Lilith, or you could do a tier 90 Nightmare dungeon. These are all different ways to do it. I also grinded the rep, but this takes actually forever. Either way, you got to pick which one of these you want to get done in order to complete the season journey and unlock the new in-game content. So that was the next step I made. Keep in mind, you only have to do 7 out of 9 out of the last of the chapter journeys. You do not have to do all 9 of them. So the 2 hardest ones for you, or the 2 most annoying ones for you, for me, it was leveling Paragon glyphs, even though I know I should do them. You just can choose not to do. So now you have the character, you have the season journey unlocked, you have to prepare for the Abattoir of Zir. Now the Abattoir of Zir is effectively Nightmare Dungeons Plus. The tier 1 of Abattoir of Zir is effectively the same thing as tier 104 of Nightmare Dungeons, or so they stated on the campfire chat. When you watch the run through, looks like they have quite a bit of HP, but even more important, they're going to deal quite a bit of damage, and you also don't get to see the negative modifiers before you go into it. For this reason, we can't exactly pick and choose the sigils that we're going to use, so we're going to want to make sure that our resistances are maxed out. This is one of the first things I worked on after I got my standard build together. My standard build actually doesn't use as many defensive properties. It uses the more uniques. It uses this Tybalt's Will Pants, but they're not very tanky, and I actually rewrote my chest plate to be even more tanky. The biggest problem I had when I was poking through and trying to complete up to tier 100 Nightmare Dungeon and prepare of Abattoir of Zir was I was dying too often, and because it's going to be even more difficult, and because we're not going to see the negative modifiers, one of the first things we're going to want to do is make sure that we have our resistances maxed. We can do this by putting resistances on things like boots, resistances on things like chest plate, or on the jewels, we can put, you can see 30% shadow resistance I have on 2 jewels for the jewelry slots here for gems, because my shadow resistance was very low. And this was the only way I was able to actually get the shadow resistance high enough. And the fire resistance, I actually had to go and get out of the Paragon tree. If you look, I have fire resistance here. I got 20% from that as well, with some more fire resistance there. So I have a total of 35% fire resist from the Paragon. So you're going to need to mess around a little bit with your build using gems, trying to get rolls on the gear in order to get your resistances maximized. And while you're working on getting your resistances, for instance, the boots, etc., you're going to want to look out for pieces of gear on the legs and the chest plate. They're going to have rolls like total armor as well as damage reduction. You can see here I have total armor percentage, damage reduction from close enemies, damage reduction from injured. And you're going to want to make sure you have advanced tooltips on as well under gameplay, because if you don't have the advanced tooltips and compare, you're not going to be able to see what the maximum roll will be on the item. For instance, see total armor is 27%, but the maximum is 29.2. So I knew that this one was a decent roll. But if this one rolled 18% total armor, I probably would have continued looking for other pieces of gear. You can see this on your gear and know whether or not it's going to be, you know, this one's 28.5 out of 29.2. You can see whether or not it's going to be good when you upgrade it by seeing where it lies within the rolls. And so you're going to be looking for pieces of gear that have damage reduction, hopefully with a high roll. You can see my flat damage reduction here is on the lower middle portions, 5.1, with 4.6 being the lowest, so this could be improved. But you're looking for as many rows of damage reduction types of stats, total armor, resistances, as high a roll as possible. And the closer you are to the perfect rolls, it's basically going to be the higher in these tiers you're going to be able to accomplish, as I think defenses are really going to be the gatekeeping for these. You can only die 0 times in Abattoir of Zir. If you die, you actually get kicked out. So you have to have high defenses or else the run is over. Also, don't forget that if you are planning to play with other people, if you die, or if anyone dies in the party, the run is over for everybody. That is what they stated. So for this reason, you really do want to fence this so you're not the one dying in the run and ending down everybody if you're going to play with your friends. Now, in the test run that the devs did on live stream, you can see right here, there is a timer. You have 10 minutes to complete this. So while you're working on defenses, you also have to keep in mind, you still have to do enough damage to beat this within 10 minutes. So obviously a good way to test this is to take a level 100 Nightmare Sigil, go see if you can do it, start the timer. If you can beat it in 10 minutes or less, then you're probably good for tier 1, which is a 104, slightly more difficult. However, if you are struggling to beat it within the 10 minutes, but you're not taking any damage, then you could probably swap out some of these tanky stats for something a little bit more damage related. Whereas if you are blowing through it and one-shotting literally everyone, but you're taking a ton of damage, obviously you need to focus more on the defensive properties. So very simple, obvious way of testing this. Run a tier night 100 with a timer and see, do I need more damage or am I dying too easy? And we're going to need a lot of dust in order to actually be able to craft these. So we want to crunch as many of these sigils as we can. So if you're going to farm some more sigils to level your Paragon glyphs, etc., try to save your dust if possible. If you look here, the Bloodforged Sigil tier 1 to create is 800 sigil powder that they showed during the dev chat. So we're going to need a pretty good amount of these. Another way for us to prepare is by making sure that we're going to be able to create the instances we need. For instance, if you look at this, increase armor by 200 for every nearby player. So playing in a group might actually be quite important so we can get as much armor as possible when we're trying to push through the higher tiers and be able to craft the elixirs that you need. Since we can't see them get negative properties until we get into them, actually having one for each of the resistances might be rather important. And obviously saving the elixirs you can't craft, this plus 900 armor one, for instance, I'd be saving some of the better elixirs moving forward. Another thing to keep in mind is we have multiple characters that you're going to be testing this on. Items like these pants and these chest plates, like the really tanky pieces of gear, if you get them with total armor, damage reduction, etc., and not things like damage reduction while bleeding or damage reduction while the enemy is poisoned. Like if you get the generic ones with total armor, etc., what you can actually end up doing is putting them in your storage, right? And if you have another character, let's say you have a Hold a Barb and a Balsork, you can be using the same pants to transfer between the characters and use them no matter what. If you're using a softcore, the softcore, hardcore, the hardcore, etc. So try to look while you're looking at the gear for things that are more generic in nature so that you can reuse them if possible. Also, because it's timed, movement speed's probably going to be important. So I went with double movement speed on the boots, though damage reduction while injured might not be terrible on the boots as well. Again, you can't die at all in this thing. So that's why I'm talking about elixirs. That's why I'm talking about incense. That's why I'm talking about as much armor as you can get. And that's also why I'm not using my DPS pants and I'm trying to go faux defensives. In fact, I rerolled my overpowered damage chest plate, do damage reduction while fortified just to get the extra damage resistances. I'm really just trying to be as tanky as I can because we can always add back more damage if we need it. But we don't want to die and be wasting sigils as much as possible in the beginning. We really want to get the glyph and level it because the glyph is going to be extremely strong. There's also some debate about Prey on the Weak being bugged from what I hear and not actually providing the damage. So if you are using Vampiric Power Prey on the Weak and you're not just using it for the vulnerability, for instance, I'm using Metamorphosis with this and this makes it I'm using it for the vulnerability, but if you're using it for the damage multiplier and you don't need the vulnerability, you might want to look into that and consider swapping this with a different one. In fact, I may myself swap in Resilience just for the damage reduction. Again, I'm trying to be as tanky as possible, so we might end up doing that swap. Beyond that, it's really just min-maxing the different properties. For instance, I have a 23% here on the two-handed, but the aspect that I have here is actually a 30%. So what I'm going to do, where is it here? I just got it recently. There it is. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put this one in as we're doing the last moment preparing, 15%. So if you can, min-max your aspects. And then beyond that, there's not really too much you can do other than wait. Once you got your armor as high as you can do it, your resistance is capped because, again, we can't tell what we're going into when we're doing this dungeon this time. You've got everything set and your build sort of ready. That's about all there is to do. And then Abattoir of Zir comes out in 2 days. And you can tweak your build from there. So that's how I've been doing it. Hopefully it helped. I am live right now, as a matter of fact. So if you want, you can join the live stream. It's twitch.tv/startwithmicrotransaction, and you can find it in the pinned comment as well as description. Love you all and see you on the next video.